So what I'd like to do is introduce our ornithologist. So a lot of times when they come to your farm, we don't see them because they disappear from the rest of us because our team is so loud. So they usually wander around the outside. And so a lot of you may not have even met the ornithologist. So here is your opportunity to meet them and to ask questions. And we're going to start out with a little presentation about all the different things about the birds. And yeah, and a lot of you received your bird reports, and so you'll be able to ask questions about those. And so I want to welcome Dr. Casey Jensen and Allison Lewis, our two ornithologists that have been on so many farms, and they'll have to tell you that number because I have no idea. But a lot of farms from 2023, 2024. Yeah. And of course, even before that, Casey was with us. So yeah, I'll pass it on to you guys. And if you guys have questions, go ahead and put them in the chat. And as we come to the end, we'll be able to fill those out. So yeah, thank you.
Great. Thank you, Lynette. So Alice and I are going to go through a fairly short PowerPoint, and how we've got this structured is we're going to give you just a little bit of an idea of where we've been and what kind of systems we've been in and looked at, which is a lot. And then go through just the basic life needs of birds. So when you think about your fields, your system, your management of the operation, trying to looking at it through the eyes of a bird and what they're needing and what they're looking for to meet their needs throughout their life cycle. And then we'll go through that, and then talk a little bit about maybe some common practices that would probably up your odds of attracting birds into your system, no matter what it is. And then I've got some birds photographs that we've taken in the fields we visited, and they're all labeled by state, not necessarily by egg system, but I can tell you what it was in by looking at the photograph. I'll probably remember. And we'll run through some of those, and then we really want to open up time for you guys to ask questions. And if you're wondering about something, or have some experience that you'd like to share in terms of what you see works, that would be really great for us too. So with that, we've got Allison's going to start the PowerPoint here. She's much more technologically savvy than I am. Here we go. So we just roll this, right?
Just roll.
We're looking at this in these regenerative ag systems. Whoopsie. So you're all part of the 1,000 Farms Initiative, and we're really trying to figure out, how to do things in a better and gentler way. We visited a lot of places. This is from 2023 or 22 to 24, and we've got 2025 now added on to this. I just got back from Arizona from a trip there. So we keep adding to the numbers. And in fact, here's the places we visited. Puerto Rico's on tap next. So we've been to a lot of states around the country. And we've looked at a lot of systems, from different types of orchards to row crop agriculture, mixed vegetable agriculture, different kinds of rangelands. And this year we did a lot of silvopasture with both pork and poultry. And so we've got a pretty broad look at birds in different systems and how they attract them or don't attract them. And so the first things I want to talk about is, what are the basic needs? So when a bird is looking for a place to settle down, it's like us or any living creature, vertebrate creature. They have three basic needs: sustenance, security, and comfort. And so sustenance we think of as food and water. And so birds are pretty good at finding water. But if in really arid places, water is an important thing. And a lot of times, if in those arid places, the agricultural system is being irrigated, and so they're picking up water there, and that might be attractive to them. So in terms of food, there's a lot of that's a really broad spectrum. Some birds eat mainly fruits and mast, the seeds that trees produce, and some just focus strictly on fruits. Others are insects, but they may be insect eaters during one part of the year and seed eaters another part of the year, depending on what their dietary needs and demands are. If they're a female bird that's laying eggs, she's really going to be focused on getting protein. And so at that point, she's going to go look for insects. And because eggs are pretty much pure protein. And when they're feeding babies, they need protein. That's the 2x4s and nails that build body tissue. Whether you're a person or you're a bird, you need protein to make bones and skin and organs and feathers. And then seeds, uh, oftentimes after the breeding season, these birds then, if they're seed eaters, will start switching back over to seeds because they're really high in carbohydrates, and that can help them regain body condition and actually pack on some fat to help in the upcoming migration or getting over the winter. So foods, birds are going to seek out what they want depending upon the time of the year. So if you think about your system that you're working in, whether it's a mixed vegetable garden or a rangeland or an orchard, um, having access to those seeds at some point in the year, and whether that's weedy edges or the plants that grew during the year and the seeds have fallen on the ground, um, the birds will find them. When we talk about security, this is the ability. So the what the habitat or the field is providing them in terms of their ability to escape predation, or to lessen the bickering that goes on between other birds of the same species. And during the breeding season, that's really important because birds are very territorial. And so having a place that they find secure, uh, to avoid those types of interactions saves them energy, and it allows them to stay there. And of course, they want to stay alive. And so they have to be able to hide from predators. Oftentimes, it doesn't take a whole lot. And most of the birds that are like in open areas, that are, say, out in open grasslands or in like garden areas, they tend to be fairly camouflaged, and so they can blend in with their environment. So even a little bit of cover sometimes is enough. And all for the needs of security, um, it's very species specific. So some birds are going to seek out thick shrubs and trees, so they can get in there so nothing can get at them. For a swallow or something like that, open sky is where they feel secure because they can see what's coming from a long ways away and they can avoid it, and they're very good at dodging those types of things. If they're birds that are mainly ground dwelling birds, a lot of the sparrows, upland game birds, they're dense cover on the ground, and then their very camouflage is their security blanket. So the what is good for one bird may not be good for another, but the point is within your system, you can make the most of what you have. So in orchards, for instance, generally we find birds that prefer the shrubby tree type habitat. Of course, in rangelands, we're looking at mainly open country birds, and so you wouldn't expect to find tree birds, right? Warblers out in the middle of a open rangeland in Montana. And so it just depends on what the system is that you're in. In terms of comfort, this is really meeting their needs to stay cool when it's hot out, to stay warm when it's cold out, to get away from the wind and rain. And it might provide some sunning spots. For instance, just last week in Arizona, I came around a corner, and here was a big old roadrunner, all fluffed up, and they've got a big patch of black feathers on their back, and they turn and orient themselves to the sun and soak up the heat to get warm. And I sat and watched this thing for quite a few minutes until it got warm enough, and then it kind of ruffled its feathers and it ran off. That was a real treat, but that was in a kind of a mesquite shrubby rangeland site in Arizona. But it had a place where it could get into the sun, but it was out of the wind and it was still kind of under a mesquite tree. So it felt secure right in where it was, and it was doing what it needed to do. Of course, weather protection, wind, rain, snow, hail. If you're a ground nesting bird in the open, hailstorms can really be tough on you. And so anything that would kind of provide a little bit of break from that coming down on you would be of help. I might add that oftentimes they meet their needs of comfort and security simultaneously. And so they're looking for areas that provide the vegetative structure that take care of both of those needs. And in fact, the way we measure habitat quality often is to try to figure out the distance that birds would need to move to meet all three of these needs: sustenance, security, and comfort. And when they can do all three, have all three of those things within a fairly small area, that's good habitat. Okay? It's as simple as that. Now, during certain times of the year, they've got other needs that they're gonna need to meet, and so during the reproductive season and nesting, that's really a critical time because they're tied to one place. They can't really move around. So the structure of that site, whether it's in a tree or a shrub or on the ground, is really, really important to that bird because its whole year's worth of effort and existence comes down to whether that nest is going to be successful or not. And again, that differs by species. And so I come back to the point of providing structure, and within your system, whether that structure is a shrub or trees or some fairly dense ground vegetation, that's what you're going to need to, or want to offer them if you want birds in your system. In terms of the needs of the bird, concealing nests and chicks from predators is really, really important. So vegetative density becomes an issue, and that's something we measure a lot when we're measuring habitat quality. And they're really good at concealing nests. We can walk through a site and we see a bird flush up off the ground, and we know there's a nest there, and we get down and search and search and search and search, and it's more often than not we can't find it. They're really, really good at concealing those nests. In fact, that when we do research on nesting birds, I have my graduate students would go out with hockey sticks. We'd get side by side, shoulder to shoulder, and walk slowly with hockey sticks, parting the vegetation, looking for those nests. That was like the only way we could find them. They're really good at hiding. So they'll make good use of the cover that you provide. Of course, then with nests too, anything that's going to provide any kind of cover that would overlap that nest for weather protection from wind and rain is going to be really important. Of course, in really cold and wet times, one of the parents, the male or the female, or they may switch off, will actually get on the nest and shield the babies and take the brunt of the weather themselves. That's what they do. And in really hot weather, shade with bright sun, shade becomes really important because they can overheat quickly. Birds can withstand fairly cold conditions better than they can stand really hot conditions. They have really high body temperatures to start with. Their average body temperature is about 106 or 107. So we're at what, 98, 96.8 or 98.6. Anyway, they're roughly 8 or 9 degrees hotter than we are. And if they get hotter than that, it's a really short window, and they die. So being able to maintain thermal regulate is a really, really important thing. So shade is super important. So here's an example. This is a mourning dove nest in an almond orchard in California. You can tell from the lighting it's well shaded. I took this on my very first sampling trip to California in 2021, and I think it was 106 degrees that day. It was hot. And these mourning dove chicks were just kind of chilling. You can see they're fairly well developed, probably only a few days from fledging themselves. But they were able to, again, hide those nests. It provided shade and cover for them. So that's what they needed. That's what they got. And then during the brooding period, food, they are eating machines. They're growing songbird, for instance. You know what they look like when they first hatch. They're naked, they're blind, they can't thermal regulate. They're essentially little pink nothings, right? And most of them, within 12 days, they fledge out of that nest and start flying. So from day 1 to day 12, 13, 14, they've got to eat a ton to put on all of that, build all those body structures, make feathers, develop all the organ systems. And so food is the real deal then. And for most part, it's insects. And so mom and dad bird are pretty much constantly bringing food and stuffing it in their mouths. And so having good insect populations at that time of the year is critical. And of course, what we find in these regenerative systems when we go sample insects, they're really rich in bugs, really rich in insects. And so for nesting birds, it's ideal. There's plenty to eat, both for the parents and the chicks. And you can imagine, I don't want to get too far off, But after a parent bird spends 2 weeks doing that, it's tired and it gets run down because they're taking care of babies, not necessarily meeting all of their needs. And so they need a little bit of time to recover after that. And again, that's going to be insects. Then during those babies need shade, just like the mourning dove nest. They need to be able to stay warm. Usually that's provided by the parent. It's called brooding, right? And so she'll sit on them or he'll sit on them and keep them warm, and then protection from the weather. I want you to think also that maybe the habitat or the seasonal needs that you're meeting actually might be in the winter. And so again, just last week, I was in a rangeland site in Arizona, and it was full of longspurs, chestnut collared longspurs that breed up here in South Dakota and across the Great Plains. But they spend their winters smarter than some of us South Dakotans. They go to Arizona for the whole winter, right? And so that rangeland site down there is blazing hot in the summer. Not very many birds nest there, although a few do, but it is really, really rich in providing both food and cover for wintering birds, because all those seeds that grew through the summer are now on the ground, and those birds can get down on the grass and have the cover needs met, the security and comfort needs they met, and all the food is laying on the ground for them. And so in winter, food is a big thing. And of course, they also need escape cover for security and comfort. And in the winter, they're not tied to a nest, so they can move geographically a lot easier, from one spot to another based on where the food is. Also in the winter, they're not territorial. And so they gather together in large groups, which they never do in the breeding season because they want to have their own territory. And so these large groups then can come through, and they may be on your field for a week. They may be there a day. They might be there for a month, depending on how fast they eat through the resources that are there. And so just keep that in mind. And then a lot of places provide the needs that birds have, which are many during migration. And food is the big one. They need fuel. So if I'm going to drive from here down to see Lynette in Kansas, I've got to stop at a gas station, right? I've got to fuel up my car. Birds are no different. If they're flying from the Arctic and they're headed to Central America, they can't do that all at once. That what they'll do is fly a few hundred miles. They may stop for a week, fuel up, put on fat reserves, and then take the next step, and then take the next step. And so these stopover points become really, really critical. And depending on where you are at geographically, you may be playing a really, really important role in providing that resource for the birds. So given all that, how will your operational decisions affect bird use? Well, look at the systems that you have, whether they're really large cropland fields or fairly small acreage mixed vegetable farms or rangeland systems, whether they're tame pasture or native pasture or orchards. You may, depending on where you're at geographically, you may be providing one seasonal need for nesting, or you may be all three. You might be a nesting site. You also might be a migratory stopover site, and you might be a wintering site. I never in my dreams would I have thought that almond orchards in California were really good wintering sites for blackbirds and meadowlarks. I think of meadowlarks as open country, prairie, grassland birds. We got out to California in the winter, and I'm finding all these meadowlarks in almond orchards. It blew my mind, So I just didn't understand their life cycle needs in the winter. I just thought of them as summer birds. Again, go back to thinking about what the bird's basic needs are: sustenance, security, and comfort. If you do that, then you're going to have success in attracting birds, no matter the season. Now, and I want to add to a point, or make a point here, that your field edges and adjacent cover to your field is super important. So weedy edges, although visually it bothers some people, to me, it makes me happy. Because when I see weedy edges, I see birds. Because it's usually those weeds are really good seed producers, and those birds are in there foraging, and it provides a little bit of cover. And also, what's next to you, adjacent, the adjacent cover, whether it's a forest or some shrubland or another crop field. What's beside you can be as important as what you have in your field. And so if you have control over what's next to you, that's something then you can manage and think about. So I've got some examples here. So this is a mixed vegetable farm, and you can see, it's pretty productive. This is the vine crop area, and so it's got vines all over. But they've let some other ground cover grow in there, and it had a lot of sparrows and goldfinches in there using that area. This is that site in Arizona I told you that was full of longspurs. Fairly short grass, didn't come up over my ankles in most places, but boy, did the longspurs like it. They were really in there. And so I've got some examples here from across the country and system. I'll just go through quickly, and then we'll open it up. So these are photos that I've taken in California almond orchards, from kingbirds on the right to grosbeaks on the left, and mockingbirds, jays. This is also an almond orchard with a white-crowned sparrow in the winter. This is a pastured poultry operation in Minnesota with savanna sparrows that are using that pasture area. This is a native rangeland, or not native, a tame rangeland site here in South Dakota that has a Vesper sparrow. In fact, this was during the breeding season, and I saw those Vesper sparrows last week in Arizona in wintering sites. Here's a white-crowned sparrow in a rangeland site out in Colorado. This is during the breeding season. A Lincoln sparrow. This again is a wintering bird in an orchard out in California. These are from Oklahoma. Lark sparrows nesting in a rangeland site that we visited this year. Grasshopper sparrow on a native pasture here in South Dakota. These are the coolest little birds. Down in Texas, the Cassin sparrow in that shrubby kind of rangeland up in the Panhandle by Canadian. This is people go all over from all over the country go to there to see this bird, believe it or not. It's kind of a plain looking bird, but if you want to see it, that's where you got to go. Brewer sparrows down in New Mexico, these are specialists of sagebrush grassland, or sagebrush systems, scrubs. And the site we visited there was full of them. Chipping sparrows here in South Dakota, you can tell this one was probably raising babies because it's carrying a caterpillar back to the nest. These are white-faced ibises, and they were going into some small farms down in irrigated fields down in New Mexico, and there were hundreds of them that were probing out, and they were fairly bare fields, but they were getting something down in that soil. It's not it's not always birds that we run into. This is a raptor, a kite from actually was hunting in orange groves in Florida. Beautiful birds. And a red-tailed hawk out in Colorado. And I imagine every one of you have red tails hanging around. This was an extremely hot day, and you can see the posture of this bird. It's got its wings spread out, and it's got its gape open, kind of panting, trying to stay cool. Of course, that tree, that big cottonwood tree, was giving it some shade. This is a barn owl sitting on its house, actually on the out in California almond orchards, and for orchard people, this can be a fairly common practice to put up bird nesting structures, particularly for raptors, that help control rodents in the orchard. And the almond folks have really bought into this. There's, I think, just about every orchard I've been in out there has one or more owl boxes for nesting more owls. Of course, eagles here in South Dakota, titmice in orchards up in Maine, chickadees in orchards up in New York, and chickadees in rangeland sites out in Colorado, and another different kind of chickadee down in Oklahoma in a rangeland site. I've got these birds kind of organized by family, so it's just my weird brain. This is down in Louisiana.
Hey, Casey.
Yeah.
Hey, Casey. Talk a little bit about abundance and richness. Can you do that?
Oh, sure.
Because they've all got their scores, right? Yeah. And what does abundance mean, and what does richness? What does that mean? Yeah.
Thank you, Lynette. When we walk our survey routes in your field, we keep track of the distance we walk. We use our phones, actually. We use technology. When we start, we hit start, and we walk the survey route that we pick, and then we count every bird we see or hear along that route, and it keeps track of that for us. So we see not only how many different species, but how many of each. So we're counting everything. Okay. And so then when we get done and we combine all the data together from all the different places we visited, we know how many birds we saw per kilometer or per 100 yards, or whatever distance you want to pick per mile. We use kilometers. And so the birds per kilometer is an indication of abundance. It's a relative abundance, right? We see, we're not going to see, for instance, if we're in a soybean field versus a really thick shrubby range site, right? Those numbers are going to be widely different. But given the type of systems we're in, we can then compare, uh, the birds per kilometer or abundance, okay, relative abundance, uh, amongst, we can compare regenerative sites to conventional sites. And that's the whole purpose of our bird work in the Thousand Farms Initiative, is to look at that data, and we can say pretty pretty uh, assuredly there are more birds in regenerative systems, and it's no mystery. You have more bugs, you have more food there. There's thicker cover there if you've got ground cover. Everything in these regenerative systems is better for birds. Okay, there's fewer poisons that they've got to deal with. So insecticides, herbicides, all of those things, and so it promotes life, and so you end up having more birds because it's easier for them to meet their needs. Okay, the same thing is true for species diversity. Okay, how many different types of birds? The difference isn't as we don't see as big a spread in diversity as we do in abundance. Okay, so birds are going to use an area or what's there at that time of year. We do see a few more species, usually, what is it, 20% maybe more birds in regenerative systems. But depending on season, and I've looked closely at almond orchards, it could be 3 to 5 times as many in terms of abundance on regenerative orchards versus conventional. And it's it's not rocket science. When you look at a conventional orchard there, bare ground, nothing underneath. So if you were a ground bird and you were looking for a place to hide out, you'd have to carry your lunch with you if you went into one of those orchards. So
so it would be like, so abundance would be like how many birds you counted, right? So if you counted like 10 blackbirds, 4 bluebirds,
right,
the score would be like, abundance is like how many birds there actually was. But the
exactly.
richness part, right? The richness part would be
How
the
many different
diversity,
kinds of birds?
how many different species. So you
Yeah,
would just, when you're doing the diversity score or the richness score, it would be the number of different kinds of birds that you had
correct,
on your farm. Yeah.
correct.
Okay. Yeah. And I think we have one question from Mark too. Would you,
Okay,
if you, yeah.
we can
Let's
just
see if
go
I
into
can get it
questions
open.
here.
Yeah. Let's see what we got here. If I can get it open for Mark to be able to talk. Let's see.
I can just, yeah. You want me to let him talk?
Can you unclick him? Yeah, give him
Yep.
ability to talk.
Oh,
Yeah.
wait. Where'd he go? He just unraised his hand.
Oh, maybe that was his question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you have a question, if you want to raise your hand or put it in the questions and answers, you can do that.
Yeah. Be able to answer those things.
If someone's got a question, feel free to ask.
Yeah. Otherwise, yeah. Casey, you can keep going through your birds. Yeah.
Well, yeah, or we can cut it off. It's just more pictures. But what I was trying to give folks is an idea of the different kinds of things we see around the country.
Mhm.
And I mean, we see some cool birds in
Yeah.
your fields, in your systems.
Mhm.
So I guess with that, I'd really like if any of you have questions.
Don't be afraid to ask. That's why we're here. We want to help you guys, and no question is a silly
Right.
question. Trust me.
Mhm.
Some questions.
Carlos. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. We'll go Carlos quick.
Yeah.
All right.
Let's see if we can. There he is.
Carlos,
Hello.
you can
Get him
Oh.
mute. Yeah.
Oh, hey, Carlos.
Unmute.
This,
Carlos, I think you're muted right now.
Yeah, see if we can get you to. There it is. All right, I think you got unmuted.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
yes.
We can. Yay.
Hey, I'm going to lower my hand. Okay, my question is, how do you account for the different times of the years when the surveys had taken? You all were here in, I believe, the first part of August. Now, the bird count here changes quite a bit because we have, 4 very distinct seasons. So that particular bird count was in the middle of summer, and also the time of day was midday. So how do you make adjustments in the bird counts to account for those two things, the time of day and the season of the year?
Well, that's a really good question. And so in terms of season, that's easier. We only compare summer to summer. We're not comparing what we would see in the winter to what we see in the summer, because that's not really a valid comparison, just depending on the needs of birds. In terms of time of day, that's a tougher one to get around. And if your farm happened to be one that we sampled in the middle of the afternoon, it's going to have a lower score, because during that time of day, and especially if it's hot, birds get in the shade and they don't like getting out. And so I have to rely much more on my ears than my eyes at that time. But still, they might not even be vocalizing. And so the numbers are going to be depressed. Now, in terms of our whole data set, that was a concern that we had coming into this. But we have enough samples across all times of the day that we, from a standpoint of statistics, that kind of evens itself out. But there is a lot of variance depending on the time of day. And so that might not be a good answer for your spot. If you're looking at your data and the time of day that, if it was an afternoon sample or an early morning sample, that's going to be different. And I wish I could sample every field at sunup. But we've been to 1,800 fields. That would take a lot of days. And so we're kind of stuck with what we have in terms of collecting that data.
So one more question in regards to the same thing, the bird count. In following visits to the different farms, will there be an attempt to try to take that bird count at the same time of day, and or the same season of the year?
The season, I think, is going to be the same, or very, very close to being the same. Time of day, I cannot guarantee, because usually it's up to our team leader to set that schedule of where we're going to go first, second, third. And sometimes it works out we're at the same place at the same time of day, and other times it does not. So that one I can't guarantee you.
Thank you for everything. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thanks for sending the bird count information here to me. I appreciate that a lot. I also shared that with our local extension service agent, who was very interested in it. He used to teach ornithology at New Mexico Highlands University, and that was classes that he taught. So he was very interested in seeing what
we found there. Yeah,
Yeah.
we really appreciated you having us out there, Carlos, because that was a really nice place to survey. Um, and I wish I would have gotten to meet him that day.
Yeah, unfortunately, I had invited him, but he was out of town at a
Right.
conference.
Yeah.
However, when it came time to take our samples, he was one of three of us that helped with the sampling. So he's really engaged and watching this program go through. As a lot of the farms that did get surveyed here in the Taos Valley are clients or have been clients of his or people that have reached out to his office for in one way or another for different agricultural information.
Good.
All right, next question. Corey would like to know, how long are your bird count routes and transects? And are they standardized across all the farms and ranches, or are they tailored to each one of the sites? You know, like when you go to rangelands versus, orchards and also to like mixed vegetable gardens, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So we do try to do at least the time the same. We go for about an hour. We have an audio recorder that we also have. That's kind of what set the standard was an hour because that's what it goes for each recording. So we try to do at least an hour on every site, depending on weather. Sometimes we get rained out, which is so fun. But depends. So if we're doing a mixed veg and it's only a half acre, well, that's very small compared to a 1,000-acre ranch. So we can't do distance the same with those because of amount of acreage. But we try to do the time the same. So we do an hour, whether it's a point count where we're just sitting there listening, watching what's coming in, or if we walk as much of the perimeter as we can. Try to do a mile or like 1.5 kilometers. We try to get the distance similar, depending on the system we're in. So for rangelands, we try to do about the same distance. Our paces, we know our paces. So we know, all right, this hour takes about this long. So we try to cover as much of the area as we can in about an hour. So we do try to keep that standard for each site to keep that all the same.
And do birds eat standing chicory? This is from Matthew. He wants to know, do they eat standing chicory?
I've I can't recall that I've ever seen a bird eat chicory.
Mm-hmm.
I have seen hummingbirds peck at the flowers.
Mm-hmm.
So I watched, can't remember the state I was in. I think it was on a Michigan trip. I was in one field that was just full of chicory, and there were hummingbirds were really buzzing around it and chasing each other off. So I mean, I have that anecdote, but I haven't seen any eating it. Yeah.
Yeah. And is there a scale? How do you know if your abundance or richness is good or needs improvement? Is there a scale that you guys kind of go by, or?
No. The best, I guess the best way to look at that is going to be so variable by not only the type of system you have, whether it's a row crop field or a mixed vegetable garden or rangeland, and also by geographic location and by time of year. So this is like calculus, multi-dimensional calculus. And so if it's a winter, say a winter time, your species richness may be fairly low, but depending, because birds flock in the winter, your abundances might be really high. And so there I would look more, at what you're in. Okay, what kind of system are you in, and what time of year is it? And so if you have I don't know, 10 or more species in a breeding system, I would say that's pretty good. I would say that's actually very good. Again, depending on the type of system that you're in. If you're in a scrub shrub grassland in Oklahoma or Kansas and it's May, you might have 30, right? But if it's the summer or if it's the winter time, you might only have 4 species. So it's a really tough thing. And so there is really no threshold that we're looking for. What we're looking at is we're comparing, okay, conventional and regenerative, and what we see is regenerative have more. So which tells us then that this is, it's a good thing if you're a bird.
But I think it is, right? We're trying to get more, right? So you're
Right.
going to see your score. And then, yeah, we'd like you to go out, right? And go see what you can see, because maybe
Yeah.
they'll see more birds. And if
Yeah.
you're seeing your birds increase, right, you know you're moving in the right direction. But
Right.
if you're seeing your birds decrease, you need to ask, what am I not providing for them?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that Merlin app,
Yes.
Huh?
for a landowner, an operator, is like magic, because you can just go out there and say, okay, I'm going to see what I hear in 15 minutes, and go plant yourself and open the app up. And every time a bird sings, this thing hears it and it'll tell you what it is. So at the end, you'll know how many species you have. Now, it could be the same bird singing over and over, so it doesn't give you an abundance score, but it does give you a diversity score. Tells you what you've got. And so that I enjoy doing this at my place, because I can see what's there in the winter, and I can see what's there in migration. I can see what's there in the summertime. It's kind of a fun comparison.
It's a free app. Anyone can get it.
Yep.
And it works on both Android and Apple. So feel free. You guys
Yep.
can do this on your own. Because we can't be there, like he was saying, we can't be there all the time. We wish we could. We love your guys' fields. But you guys can go out and do this. This is something you can do every morning. Go out, spend, grab your coffee, whatever you need, and go out 10, 20 minutes, go sit outside and just listen what's around you. It's really amazing to hear. I love seeing my bird feeder outside my window every morning. I can see what birds are there, and if I need to refill the feeder, or all the blackbirds are obviously now here on the spring because they're all flocking around my feeder. So it's just a fun thing to do in the morning. It's a nice little wake up, I think.
And what are some best practices that you've observed for attracting birds? You mentioned weedy boundaries. Any others that you really liked, that you were like, if everybody would do this, or if, these types of systems would always do this, they'd always have an abundance or richness, right? We're looking for richness of species. What else did you see?
Well, if you leave cover on the ground, and I know some systems, they need to clear it off seasonally. Again, I know almond folks, because the almonds go on the ground and then they have to pick them up, and so they need to clear those aisles out. But then they put cover crops right back in again, and so using cover crops, keeping cover on the ground, reducing or eliminating the pesticides, and herbicides, is a good thing.
Moving your animals. Don't do year-round grazing. Let them have access to a whole pasture. Even if you split it up into a quarter, so they get 4 spots, it gives it time to rest, gives it a little bit more area for birds to be and insects to be, and lets everything grow back. And then you might get more diversity, which is better for your cattle even. So you might get more forbs, which can be medicine for them naturally.
And on the edges, I mean, if you really want birds, you can plant little strips of like pollinator strips, or sunflowers,
anything,
anything like that will attract millet, or a mix of those things. That certainly would attract birds.
Absolutely.
And then it's another question would be, what happens when I mow, right? I want to keep my borders, sometimes short, I don't want to keep them too tall because those weeds, are going to get into whatever I'm planting. What are your thoughts about mowing those strips around the edge?
Well, I mean, if that's part of your management system and it's done for your purpose, I'm not going to say don't mow. But if you could keep those strips as narrow as possible, if that would be um, advisable, I guess, from a bird standpoint. But even mowing, sometimes I see that when I mow, my swallows follow me
Yeah.
because I disturb flying insects when I mow, and the swallows, it's dinner time for them. So they're making use of that. Um, I yeah, I would say keep it as narrow as possible. It's all based on your need of why you're mowing and what you're trying to accomplish by mowing.
Hugh has a question. He says, as growers are trying to encourage all birds, or should we try and ID pest-eating birds? In our case, bluebirds, I think. We could build bluebird nesting boxes that might encourage insect policing, policing, and some migrating birds eat our crops, like Canada geese. So we discourage them, sort of. Should we be developing a wild bird management plan? And who should we ask to help with this?
Well, every state that I know of has a wildlife person on the extension staff at the state land grant university. That would be a good place to start in terms of some ideas. I think nesting boxes are great. Bluebird boxes, they might attract bluebirds, they might attract tree swallows, they might attract other things. Go to the bluebird.org website. It'll give you the dimensions and everything for building bluebird boxes, the plans. What's important is that hole needs to be small enough that they can get in, but starlings can't, because starlings are cavity nesting birds, just like bluebirds. And if they can get in the cavity, they'll take over, they'll kick them out. And so just make sure that the hole's the right size. But yeah, wrens, most wrens, bluebirds, tree swallows. If you're in the western part of the country, violet green swallows, a lot of things like nest boxes.
And have you developed any suggestions or protocols for irrigating in a way that's not detrimental to birds that are using the pasture, your ground nesters?
Yeah, that's a tough one, because in places where flood irrigation happens, what I see in flood irrigated, pastures is that the ground nesting birds just aren't there, or if they are, they're not very numerous, and maybe just having a raised an area that's a little bit higher, like stays out of the water, that allows them to get into. But you need to be careful with that, because it'll turn into essentially a death trap. Because if it's small, birds will use it, but then predators aren't stupid, and they'll put two and two together pretty fast, and so the bird will initiate nesting, and then pretty soon a skunk or a coyote or something comes along and eats their eggs. And so we find that here in South Dakota with pheasants that nest in roadside ditches. The nest success is less than 5%, just because a roadside ditch is a straight corridor, and if I'm a fox or a skunk or a raccoon, I can just zigzag down that ditch and I can find every nest there is. So you kind of need to keep that in mind as well. So flood irrigation is tough. I haven't seen any problem with overhead irrigation.
Okay. Okay, just the flood and irrigation. Matthew would like to know if we should carry Merlin around the field periodically and see how things change over time.
That'd be a good idea.
There's a reason not to. And especially if you are walking, all of a sudden you hear something you haven't heard before. Great time to pull it out and see what's new in your area and see if it's one that might be uncommon, migrating through, it's off path, or you're now providing great habitat and it's a great spot for it. And then that's great to monitor, and especially citizen science, that's the best way to help with that.
Right.
Yeah. And how much total rainfall impacts richness versus abundance? Our sites range from 6 inches to 21 inches of rain last season before the sampling. How does rainfall impact the richness versus the abundance?
Well, more moisture during the growing season is going to have more, you're going to have more vegetative growth, more structure. So I think pretty assuredly, and I know this from research work I did, at the university, that in years with good rainfall, we had a lot more success, a lot more birds than drought years. And so if you've got a part of your property that's been in drought, but another part that's getting good rain, my guess is there's going to be a lot of effect.
Kevin would like to know, have you sampled rangeland systems the same season as the controlled burn? And what impacts have you seen?
We've done any. I know I've personally been on a research up in North Dakota where we did prescribed burns, and they're looking at it up there for nesting birds for like throughout the years. And it was on about a 4-year rotation. So every 4 years they burned an area. And it opened my eyes. I didn't realize this. Birds do use that burned area. Not many, but there are birds that love that bare ground. They just love it. And then the next year, when it's new growth, but still short, different group of birds will love that. And the amount of birds grows with each year. But then you hit a window of, all right, year 5, year 6, when there's a lot of vegetation, a lot of that thatch, the dead material below, they don't really like that. It's hard for them to walk through with chicks, and they can't really get a nest. It's hard for them to use it. So then you see the numbers start going back down. So that's where, personally, I think using prescribed burns occasionally every maybe 5 years is great, depending on your rainfall. Like Panhandle of Texas and Oklahoma, probably not great because they don't get that much rain. I think about 18 inches on average for the whole year, which is not much compared to us up here. We get way more. But I personally have not sampled with Ecdysis on a prescribed burn. They had talked about it, and they might have had some accidental burns or something got out of hand, but nothing, I don't think, to my knowledge, was prescribed.
There's been a lot of work done down in Oklahoma, out of Oklahoma State University, on the patch burn graze kind of management system that they've been doing down there. And just like Allison said, what they see is if they patch burn graze one pasture, part of the pasture this year, it's going to have a different bird community than the areas that are adjacent to it that weren't burned. But in the following years, then that community changes, it shifts. You've got some birds like horned larks that they want the crappiest pool table habitat available. I don't see how they live out there, but that's what they like. And once the grass starts to grow, then they disappear. Luckily there's usually some overgrazed ground somewhere, that they can find. Yep. We're in no shortage of horned larks. Yeah. Okay. But they will use those systems. Um, from
Yeah,
a
so what I'm hearing then is just, doing it differently, right? Not burning every year, but
Right,
no,
every year.
like you said, every
exactly.
5 years, and then you're okay. But it's when you
Yes.
burn every year, then you're going to eliminate a lot of
Yeah.
that diversity of species, that richness that we talk
Yeah.
about. Mhm.
Yeah, and if you
Yeah.
want, like, all right, this 20, I want to burn it. Do a small little 5 here, a 5 up there the next year. Spread
Yeah.
it out, make a quilt. Is how I was described to it in college. Of making a quilt, the patchwork burning. That's the best. And even if you like another way to describe this too is if you accidentally overgraze an area, especially early in the spring, that's probably not bad. Something will use that. Or, don't do it every year, try not to do that. But if you do happen to do it, don't feel too bad because something will use it. Just remember to give it a little break, give it some recovery time. It's all okay. Nature will heal. That's what it does.
So I can speak to upland game birds. I've done a lot of work on them through the years. Things like prairie chickens and sharp-tailed grouse and pheasants and partridge. For them, like Allison said, getting rid of that duff is really important because those chicks, as soon as they dry off in the nest, they're running, and their mom's not feeding them; she's just taking them to where the food is, and so they need to be able to run and get through. And so, what we see, just as a rule of thumb, if you try to walk through the grass and don't pick up your feet, kind of shuffle, and if you trip, okay, if you're getting tangled up and you're tripping, it's probably getting a little bit too rank for those kind of birds. And so they like to be able to move through the vegetation pretty freely, but they need to have enough overhead cover so that every hawk that comes over doesn't see them, so that they can hide. And so the rule of thumb we use there is if you take a football and you just toss it a little ways and it disappears. So the grass is high enough that you can't see the football. That's for a prairie chicken, that's ideal. Okay, so they can get down, they can hide. They're brown on the back, they can blend in. And so that's a thing most people can relate to. If you can hide a football in
That's
it.
a simple task. Yeah, that's a great task. Yeah.
Yeah.
Carlos would like to know specifically, how do I attract meadowlarks? What do meadowlarks like? They were here 20 years ago, but now there's virtually none.
Two things. One, they like some vegetation. So like the football, something like that or taller. Okay. They don't really like super short vegetation. And number two, they tend to be area sensitive. So the amount of acres that you have, or you and everybody around you has, for instance, I talked about grasshopper sparrows. You're never going, I don't want to say never, but you rarely find them in an area less than about 60 acres. So in small grassland patches, they're not there. They're what we call an area sensitive species. I think meadowlarks also are somewhat area sensitive. It's not as much as 60 acres, it might be 30. Okay, I would have to go read the literature on it. But when they get carved, the grass gets carved up into 2 or 3 acre blocks, and there's not a lot of them around. They just leave. They're area sensitive.
And Gail would like to know, do birds tend to have fewer young during years of drought?
Yes. Sometimes some birds will lay fewer eggs in years of drought, because remember that hen has to produce all of those eggs, and it's a fairly significant portion of their body mass for a gallinaceous bird, like a chicken, or prairie chicken, or a turkey. If you're a songbird, the number of eggs might be the same, but there's no insects to feed them. And so they don't survive. And so 2 years ago, I think we had a dry year. I had several tree swallow nests in my bluebird boxes, and they all abandoned. There just wasn't food to feed them.
Yeah.
So they just abandoned the young. And so yes, in times of drought, and other songbirds will do the same thing. If there's no food.
Yeah. Just kind of going through. Yeah, so I think we've answered everybody's questions so far, but if we haven't, go ahead and raise your hand, and yeah, I've gone through, I think, most of them through the chat
Okay.
in here. So yeah, if somebody else has something that they would like to,
And
even if it's
I
just
would
a
invite
comment or a
you,
suggestion or something, yeah.
I would invite you to contact Allison or myself directly.
Absolutely.
Well, we would be happy to talk with you and answer any questions that you might have. We can, I think you're going to send out a little questionnaire after following this up, and we'll make sure that my contact and Allison's contact information is on that.
Yeah, we'll do that. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. See if there's any more.
Nick.
Any questions?
Oh, no, never mind. There we go. Can we do on our farms? I can repeat that. Sampling method, reviewing it of what we do.
You want to review?
Yeah. So
somebody asked about reviewing the sampling method. Matt.
Yeah.
So
what do you have a map or?
What we do, whenever we get to the site, first thing we do for us is we go set out the audio. But then from there, depending on what it is, rangelands, crop, whatever it is, we generally try to walk as much of the area as possible, whether it's the perimeter or get the central, depending if it's a giant rangeland. We walk that for about an hour. We had written down about a mile, but then we switched to kilometers, but trying to cover roughly about a mile if you can on bigger areas. If not, it's fine. It's just the hour-long survey. We just start walking and we'll stop because some birds don't like how much we move. So we'll stop for a few minutes, just stop, listen, look around, see what birds are there. Don't forget to look up higher because you got raptors and predatory birds who are going to be circling above. But we just, walk, listen, look what birds are flying, and just do that throughout the property.
And do you do like a GPS? I mean, are you taking, do you kind of know what your GPS route is every time? So like if somebody wanted to repeat your route, right, that you did in their field so they could do the exact same sampling, is that something that we could share? How you walked, or do you kind of?
The app that we use is called eBird, and it uses the GPS in the phone to track us. And so you can go to the data for that site, that sample, and the map is there.
Yeah, we can pull that.
And we can pull that up. But if you want it, we could print that off and send it to you.
Yeah, we can easily download that and send it to you if that's what you want. That's not a problem. We can do that for you.
Cool. That's awesome.
I might add, if I sample the same the same farm or ranch in multiple years, and I've done a lot of these, I try not to follow the same route. I want to sample this. I went over here this year. I'm going to see what's over here, because there might be some micro differences in soil or whatever is going on there, and so different birds might show up.
I know. When I get to the site, I will look at GPS. I'll pull up Google Maps or look on the eBird app and see topography. Oh, there's a wetland in the back. I want to go hit that area, make sure I get kind of roughly all the habitat I can in an area, but also managing my time where I'm not spending 3 hours over there and making the crew wait for us either. So I try to do that of like, oh, there's trees back there. I want to go hit those trees or work my way back there. There's a wetland over there, try to get my way there and just try to cover as much of the land as I can to get a good representation of what's there for you guys. That's what we do. And then to answer your question also, Matt, we do most of it by ear, but I do use Merlin. You use Merlin because I am new to this. I'm graduating in 2020. I haven't been to the East Coast or the West Coast or down south. There are birds that are new to me, so I don't know their song and call, so I have to do that. And fun fact that I found out because of doing this job, birds in Canada versus birds in Texas have a different accent, like we do. So a dickcissel in Canada is going to sound different than one down in Texas. Like I found out, I'm like, that sounds so familiar. Why does it sound familiar? So I called the Merlin app, dickcissel. Oh, it's just slower, or it has a slightly different rhythm to its song. So they sound similar, but they do have that slight accent like we do.
Regional dialect.
Yep.
That's so funny. All right. And so do either of you have a favorite bird? Hugh wants to know, what's your favorite bird?
Depends on the day.
Yes.
But today I'm going to pick scissortail flycatchers.
Ah,
Those are so
really?
I love scissortail flycatchers.
I don't think there's a bird that I don't like. I love owls because of how stealthy and quiet they are. Like when we did orchards, the almond orchards, when one flew past us, we could not hear it. And it was crazy, especially when a red tail flew past, we're like, oh, there it is. But if we saw an owl, we're both trying to like say to each other, oh, it's over there, it's over there. And you could not hear them. They're just so beautiful and quiet. And they're gorgeous. But hummingbirds are the same. Yeah, I love hummingbirds. We rarely get to see those. It is fun when I get to see those in a field, but yeah, I love them all.
Do you make the data publicly visible on eBird?
None of the data. Well, I don't want to say that. You can go into eBird and look at if we choose, we can have that data be visible to the public, and I think we both do.
I think so. Yeah.
Some people don't want their data. They put it into eBird, and this is a worldwide citizen science program. I would invite you to look at it, ebird.org. It's out of Cornell University. And they've done wonderful things with this massive data set. And so not only are we doing our job, but we're adding to the bigger citizen science data set as well that can be used by using eBird. But you would have to go to eBird, and then if you know a site, and again, if you can get a hold of Allison or myself, if you're interested in looking at your site specifically, we can give you then the name of what that route was, because every route we do gets a new name, and so and usually it's by address. The GPS tells us where we're at, and it's by address. There are some areas where so many people go to them, it becomes what's called a hotspot.
Yeah.
And so you can go to those hotspots if there's one near you and look at that, and you'll get hundreds and hundreds of lists that came in from that spot.
Yeah.
And that might be a better measure for what people see near you. So if you look at the eBird map and find a hotspot that's close to you, it might be a park or someplace that's accessible to the public. And so a lot of people go there, and bird watchers go there and bird.
Does eBird listen and catalog?
I don't think it listens.
No, it does. It's just a cataloging system.
Yeah. You go in and
Merlin
You
does
have
the
to
listening.
enter it yourself.
Yeah, Merlin does the listening. They're both out of Cornell.
Yeah.
they're out of the same laboratory,
Okay.
but they don't shake hands.
Yeah.
But Merlin will do the listening, or if you have a photo of a bird that you don't know what it is, you can put that into Merlin, and it will give you an answer of what it thinks it is. I might add that Merlin isn't completely accurate.
No.
it's probably 90% or better.
Yeah.
And so we have to kind of use our best judgment.
Yeah.
So if we're out in the middle of a grassland and it's telling us there's a wetland bird there, we're probably not going to believe it. Because it's, you know, it's an AI thing, you know, that it's learned by, you know, people putting in bird songs and bird songs and bird songs, thousands, millions probably. And so it's comparing it to whatever the data set is. Say this is the closest. I like it because, you know, now in my 70s, my ears aren't as good as they used to be. And so some birds I have to be really close if I'm going to hear them. I love having Allison with me because she's got good ears still. She goes, "Oh, there's a grasshopper sparrow over here." And I'm like, beats me.
Yeah, those ones are in particular where if the wind's just wrong, you're not going to hear them because they're higher pitch but low volume.
Right.
So if you're far enough away, you're not going to hear them. Even I don't hear them if I'm 100 feet away, 100 meters roughly.
Merlin does.
Merlin usually picks them up, but also if you see a very small sparrow hopping around a grassland, it's probably grass. There's a good chance it's a grasshopper sparrow.
Yeah.
Especially if you can't hear it. Yeah, that's probably the best bet.
I've also found that Merlin isn't so good at picking up things that I hear really well, like crows and ravens.
Yeah.
Those low
pitch.
frequency, although they can even be kind of loud, and Merlin's not picking them up, but I'm like, I hear it fine.
Yeah.
So you can't fully rely on Merlin.
No.
But it's a good baser, you know.
It'll help if nothing else. And what I like to do, especially when I'm in a new area, I have it playing or listening, and then I look at the birds and I go through and listen to because they have on their calls and songs. So if you'd be like, all right, I think I hear this bird, you can double check, be like, yep, that's what that bird is. Cool. I heard this one, it's a meadowlark, or I heard this one, it was a song sparrow. You can go through and be like, nope, I heard something like it, but it wasn't quite that. But then get you maybe to a group or a family. You can go through that family, be it Merlin or eBird, and see, all right, listening to all the sparrows in the area. I'm like, all right, it probably was this one. That sounded closer to what it was, or visually too.
Yeah. And do you ever use the app, you know, to call in birds, or is there an app that you can double check, right? So like I remember, Casey, we were in Missouri, you know, at sampling, and you called that grasshopper sparrow to us. And that was so crazy. So what was that? It was that you used to get that sparrow to come so close.
That was Merlin. It's the songs. Okay. You know, when the Merlin, you know, it says it's a grasshopper sparrow there. If you then just punch grasshopper sparrow, a list of different calls and songs will come up, and you can play one. And sometimes I don't do it often because I don't have time, but sometimes I will just to verify. Especially like the ones I don't hear, but Merlin does. So I'll play that, and all of a sudden a grasshopper sparrow pops up and sits on the wire, and I'm like, okay, we're good. It's a grasshopper sparrow.
And I do the same for ones that are in the deep woods where I hear them, but I can't quite see them. I double check, or I hope I get close enough to be like, yep, I got eyes on it, or do I trust it? It depends. Like if it's very loud vocal, I'm like, yes, that's definitely what that is. Or if it's so far off, I can't tell what it is with my own ear. Merlin's saying one thing, I'm not going to say, yes, that's what it is 100%. Because I rather make sure I get eyes on it or get enough audio that I can confirm what it is.
Yeah. That's cool. That's a way to double check.
Yes.
Yeah. To make sure. Yeah. For us, right? For those people that aren't ornithologists, right? That just want to be able to make sure that we're actually identifying it correctly.
Right.
Yeah. Anybody else? Any more questions or thoughts or any of those things for
if you have to
us?
run, don't worry if we keep answering questions. We are recording this. We are going to be posting it as well. So if you have to run, do not feel bad if we answer any more questions. So everyone should get that link when we're done here.
Exactly. Yeah. We're almost to time.
Yeah.
About 1 minute left. So anybody else, last thoughts anybody has? Any last questions? Give you a minute.
I appreciate everybody sticking with us.
Thank you. I know this was
Yeah.
kind of long, but it's good.
And I hope,
Oh,
you
we
got
got a thumbs up. Yep.
you got out of this what
Oh,
what you were hoping you would get out of
Yeah.
it.
Yeah,
If you
yeah.
come up with
And
questions,
it doesn't mean the conversation ends, right? It
No.
doesn't mean
No,
the
no.
conversation ends. We're opening it up so that, yeah, you can get the information that you need, right? And if you
Yeah.
do want that data in eBird, so you can walk the same route,
Mhm.
Yep.
yeah, we can provide that information.
Yeah.
And then, of course,
Yeah.
like we said, we're going to share their email
Yeah.
addresses and contacts, so you can ask more questions as they
Absolutely.
come up.
And hopefully this coming field season, you'll see either Allison or I
Yeah.
Mhm.
again.
Yeah.
So
And when I usually send people is usually when they're sitting in the van writing down all their notes.
Yeah,
So I
that's a
always
good time to
usually
come talk
send
to
the
us.
farmer. They're over there in the van because they're like, where'd that ornithologist go? Well,
Yeah.
actually, I
Yeah.
always go, where'd the bird people go? And then I'll have to say they're in the van. Go get them.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a great time to
Yeah.
talk to us because
Come
we're just
talk
writing down
talk
our
to them because
data.
that's right. And they love to talk birds with
Yeah,
everybody.
absolutely.
So
We can
yeah.
show you what's in your field of what we saw at that time. Like I said, you're going to see
Yep.
more stuff than us, and that's just the nature of our work.
Yeah.
But
Yep.
Yeah.
And we love to see your list.
Yeah.
If you do have a list of birds that you saw there, we love to see that.
Absolutely.
So yeah,
Yeah.
keep track. Well, thank you too. You guys did a
Okay.
beautiful
Thank
job.
you.
I so appreciate you. And
this is
thank
good.
everybody who came. We so
Thank you.
appreciate it.
Thank
And
you.
there's
Thank you.
going to be more. We're going to keep doing these once a month. And yeah, and try to learn about your data. But remember, your report is coming out. There'll be a full report in March. We used to do a preliminary report, but we're not doing that any longer. We're doing this, right? We're going to give you some of your information each time, and then have these webinars. So yeah, this was just the first one with the birds. And then, like I said, that final report will be out in March. There will be an end of year survey that's coming out to all of our farmers. So yeah, be watching for that in your email. It should come out this week or next. So watch for that. And remember, we'll help you walk through it. So don't get scared. If you have questions, we're always there for you. So, all right. Thank you guys.
All right.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, folks.
Bye-bye.